Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going into a really heavy, but I think a profoundly necessary story.
Mm.
We're looking at Chicago in the early 1980s,
Mm.
specifically the Chicago Ripper crew.
Right.
And our goal here, it isn't just to list the terrible things that happened, it's to really understand the mechanics of it. How does this kind of systematic evil not only exist, but thrive right under everyone's noses?
And not just thrive, but how it might even be shielded, whether on purpose or not, by the very system that's supposed to stop it.
Exactly.
That's the real core of this story, I think. It's less about a monster and more about a failure of observation, a massive one.
A failure of observation. I like that phrasing.
Yeah, we think of serial killers as these lone wolves, right? Outliers.
Right.
But the sources on this case, the reports, the books, they force you to look at the city itself,
Yeah.
at the infrastructure.
So the question becomes, did the system just buckle under the pressure? Or was it something more? Was it actively complicit?
That's the mission of this deep dive. That's what we have to figure out.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's unpack the setting. Chicago, early 80s. The sources hit us right away with this paradox.
Mm-hmm. The city of noise.
Right, it's all steel and steam and trains and people. But underneath all of that noise, a new kind of silence was growing. What exactly was that silence?
So that silence was systemic. I mean, the sources call it the silence of a question never asked.
A question never asked.
Yeah, think about it. All that noise, the traffic, the industry, it's kind of a reassurance, It sounds like a city that's working.
Sure.
But beneath that, certain women started to vanish. Women on the, quote, frayed edges of the city's tapestry. And when they went missing, the reaction wasn't a 5-alarm fire.
No.
It was a weary, bureaucratic sigh.
Mm-hmm.
The system it filed it away. The official thinking was basically, these things happen.
And that kind of apathy, it's like an open invitation for predators, isn't
It's
it?
strategic weakness.
Right. The victims were marginalized. Maybe they were involved in sex work, maybe they had addiction issues, or maybe they just didn't have a family that could, make a huge stink about it.
So their absence didn't create those screaming headlines. It was treated as tragic, sure, but manageable. It was just more background noise for a system that was already completely overwhelmed.
And it's in that environment, in that silence, that the horror really starts to organize itself.
Exactly. This is the crucial point the sources make. This wasn't just random violence. It wasn't someone snapping.
No.
This was, and this is their word, worship.
It's such a chilling word.
It is. You have this small group of men who genuinely believed they were on a mission for some, dark prince who demanded proof of their loyalty, and they turned murder into a ghastly liturgy.
That's the difference right there. Rage versus ritual. Rage is impulsive.
Yeah.
Ritual is calculated, it's repeatable, it can get bigger.
And if the violence, the torture, the mutilations, if that's the currency of your worship, how do they get away with it for so long?
That's the real question.
And it comes down to institutional proximity. The truth wasn't just missed. In some ways, it was shielded. The leader of this cult, wasn't some hermit hiding in a basement.
No, he was inside the system.
To a degree, yes.
This is where the story just turns your stomach. It stops being a standard true crime story and becomes this indictment.
Mm-hmm.
That one line from the sources, one of the monsters was sitting at a table with the police, trading whispers, all while the blood was still fresh on his hands.
And when you hear that, you realize this isn't just about the crime. It's about the catastrophic failure that allowed it to happen. We have to understand the city that set the stage for this.
Right, so let's go there. Chicago in the late 70s, early 80s. To really get how they operated, you have to feel what the city felt like then. And it wasn't good. The sources say it was a city holding its breath.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. This was the Rust Belt collapse, and Chicago was ground zero.
We're talking about massive economic decay.
Huge. The sources paint this really vivid picture of factories that were once the heart of the city just standing there like hollow, silent tombs.
And that's not just a statistic, right? That's something you see every day. It's a visual reminder that things are falling apart.
Absolutely. It leads to poverty, addiction, this feeling of abandonment. And that feeling seeps into the neighborhoods.
The sources have that line about neighborhoods deteriorating, not with a bang, but with the slow, desperate sound of a board being nailed over a window.
It's so bleak. That's the kind of despair that creates the perfect soil for something like this. When people lose faith in the system, predators know they can get away with more.
Which leads right to the police being completely swamped.
Systemic overload. Crime was spiking everywhere, and the police were, quote, drowning in a sea of paper and despair.
So you have to imagine being a detective back then. Your caseload is impossible.
Right, and you have to prioritize. So deep investigative work on a missing person case with no influential family behind it, that becomes a luxury you just don't have.
Cases become statistics. People become case numbers.
And that's the terrible truth the Ripper crew figured out. They knew that if they stayed in the shadows and picked the right prey, they could, quote, operate with impunity.
The city was too busy dealing with 1,000 other fires to notice their very specific, very ritualistic one.
The chaos gave them cover, and what's even more disturbing is how normal they seemed on the surface.
Yes, the banality of it. This wasn't some coven meeting in a spooky graveyard.
No, their temple was, as the sources say, the ordinary. A living room with a worn-out sofa, a kitchen table covered in beer rings.
They were just guys. Friends, brothers, co-workers.
They had jobs. They went home. They seemed completely unremarkable during the day. And then at night, the conversation would turn to these darker currents.
That veneer of normalcy is a weapon, isn't it?
It's tactical. It's the best camouflage there is. Because we all have this assumption that real monsters have to look like monsters.
But they didn't. They just looked like Chicago.
Exactly. And they used the city's own exhaustion as their invisibility cloak.
Okay, so let's get into the men themselves. Because this wasn't just a random group. There was a hierarchy, a structure.
Absolutely crucial. To understand the escalation, you have to understand the roles. They created this toxic little ecosystem.
And at the center of it all was the leader, Robin Gatch.
Yeah.
The sources are very clear. He wasn't a raving lunatic. He was the opposite. He was charismatic.
And that's the key. A raving lunatic is easy to ignore. A charismatic leader, someone who can make horror sound reasonable, that's infinitely more dangerous.
He was the architect.
The intellectual architect, yes. He provided the terrible meaning behind it all. He'd talk about Satan, but not like a wild-eyed preacher.
That's how you talk about it.
Like a CEO. The sources use that exact analogy. He spoke with the calm, assured tone of a seasoned executive discussing a business plan.
That is deeply unsettling.
It is, because he took the unspeakable and made it sound logical, inevitable. Like it was just the next step on a path to power. He gave them the philosophical permission slip they needed.
So he lays out this twisted business plan. Who carries out the work?
That's where the followers come in. The brothers, Andrew and Thomas Coquerelice.
They were younger, right. More impressionable.
Much younger. And their defining trait was loyalty. Loyalty to each other and a blind loyalty to Geck's vision.
So that family bond, which should be a good thing, gets twisted.
It was perverted into a chain of obedience. They were looking for a mission, for purpose, in a city that had none to offer. Geck gave them one. They didn't need to be convinced, they just needed to be told what to do.
So you have the brain, Gecht, and the muscle, the Coquerelice brothers. Who's the fourth man? Edward Spreitzer.
Spreitzer is the spark. He's the one who completes the circuit.
What do you mean?
If Gecht is the brain and the brothers are the hands, the source material describes Spreitzer as the raw, shuddering nerve ending.
Wow.
He was the volatile one, the one with the explosive energy who was always ready to translate the dark talk into dark action. Gecht needed someone who would jump first, no questions asked. That was Spreitzer.
So without him, maybe they just stay a group of guys with dark fantasies.
It's possible. He was the catalyst. He made it real.
And together, they build this shared delusion.
That they're special, chosen, anointed. That they're not just murderers, they're performing a sacred duty.
It's classic cult dynamics, right? It isolates them from normal morality.
Completely. If you believe you're on a holy mission, then there's nothing you can't justify. Any act becomes sacred, and that psychological framework is what allowed them to keep escalating, without question.
Which brings us to the core motivation, the belief system itself. Because we're so far beyond simple rage here, this was methodical.
A horrifyingly pragmatic theology. I mean, the source material's idea of Satan as a CEO is just, it's perfect.
It takes all the gothic horror out of it and makes it sound like a corporate job.
Exactly. A CEO who demands quarterly results. Loyalty wasn't about faith. It was about performance. It had to be proven with tangible acts of sacrifice.
So the goal wasn't just to kill. It was to meet a quota.
A quota measured in pain. The sources are explicit about this. A woman's suffering was the central hymn. Her terror was the psalm. The acts were designed to maximize that suffering because they believed it was the currency their master wanted.
And that leads to the specific mutilations. the offerings.
Right. They weren't just trophies in the usual serial killer sense. For them, it was a sacrament. They believed they were literally liberating a power from the body and sending it to their patron as payment.
It's a way to confirm their own special status. Look what we can do.
And then they documented it. They filmed it.
And we have to stress, this wasn't just for bragging rights.
Not at all. The sources frame it as part of the ritual. The camera was an extension of the sacrament.
So rewatching the tapes wasn't just about reliving it.
It was about re-experiencing what they saw as a moment of transcendence. It was a way to reinforce the delusion over and over that they were elite, set apart from humanity. The VCR was their altar.
You know, what's truly terrifying about that framework is the certainty it provides.
The cold, logical framework for the illogical.
Yeah. Once you accept that killing is for promotion, or torture is for tenure, as the sources say, there's no bottom. There's no line you won't cross.
There is no abyss, because your worst actions have become your most virtuous, and that certainty is what guaranteed they would keep getting worse. They had no fear, only a mission, and a constantly growing quarterly quota to meet.
We have to stop for a second and bring this back to the human cost and the unbelievable failure to connect these crimes.
It really raises a question about cognitive bias, doesn't it? When something is so brutal, so outside the norm, does your brain just refuse to see a pattern? Does it try to isolate each incident because connecting them is too terrifying?
That has to be part of it, especially for an overworked police force.
And we have to remember the victims. They were people who, as we said, could fade from the city's landscape without a massive, immediate alarm being raised.
We should say their names: Lorraine Borowski, Linda Sutton, Rose Davis, Rafaela Sanchez, Sandra Delaware. These weren't just statistics.
No, but to the police, they were scattered data points. Tragedies, yes, but isolated ones.
And why was that? Why couldn't they see the connection?
The sources say the scenes were so brutal, so surreal, that they seemed to defy connection.
So the extremity of the violence actually worked as camouflage.
In a horrifying way, yes. Imagine you're a detective in 1982. You find a body in one part of town with these ritualistic wounds. It's bizarre. A few weeks later, miles away, another body, similar but not identical trauma.
You're not thinking organized cult.
You're thinking different monster. You're thinking these are separate acts of madness, not a coordinated campaign. They were, in the minds of the overloaded, under-resourced police, the product of different monsters.
They missed the signature, which was the ritualistic purpose behind the mutilations.
Exactly. They were too extreme to fit the pattern of a typical serial killer.
And the implication of that is just chilling. The fact that the police weren't connecting the dots meant the crew was essentially given a green light to continue, to get better at it.
Escalation as rehearsal, that's what the source calls it.
Every murder they got away with made them more confident.
It reinforced their delusion that they were protected, untouchable. The city had no idea a black sacrament was being performed right under their noses because the system designed to see it was too exhausted, too biased, and looking in all the wrong directions.
Which brings us to the part of the story that it curdles. It goes beyond incompetence or being overwhelmed.
It goes into betrayal.
This is where we learn that the central monster wasn't just hiding in plain sight. He was being shielded.
We have to be crystal clear here. Robin Gesht, the leader, the high priest of this nightmare. For a time, he was a police informant.
An asset.
An asset, which in the transactional world of law enforcement means he was trusted. He was providing them with information on other crimes.
The level of irony there is it's grotesque. The police were getting tips from the man who was committing the very atrocities they couldn't solve.
It's worse than irony. In the grim economy of policing, protecting a valuable asset can sometimes become a higher priority than solving a messy, confusing case involving marginalized victims.
So when whispers started on the street about a satanic crew, about the mutilations,
those whispers eventually led to Get's name, and when they did, they hit a wall.
the wall of silence.
Yeah, the sources describe it as a quiet word from a superior, a redirected gaze. Case files that might lead to him suddenly get moved to the bottom of the pile.
Because the cognitive dissonance is just too much. How can our guy, our asset, who helps us close cases, be this monster?
Exactly, and that's where you have to ask, was this active corruption a conscious choice to let him walk free? Or was it the more, banal cancer of incompetence and fear?
Fear of what?
Fear of a scandal so massive it would destroy careers. A scandal involving ritual murder, Satanism, and the fact that one of their own informants was the ringleader. It would tear the department's credibility to shreds.
And the sources make the point that, in the end, the motive doesn't even matter as much as the result.
The result is what matters, and the result was a protective haze descend around Robin Gecht and his crew.
They weren't just hiding anymore, they were being protected.
In a very real and tragic sense, yes. The system, whether by active choice or by panicked paralysis, gave them immunity, and every victim during that period paid the price for that silence.
But even a shield like that can't last forever. The number of bodies just becomes too much to ignore.
The operation was doomed to collapse under its own weight. But what's so frustrating is how it happened.
It wasn't some brilliant detective work that finally cracked the case.
Not at all. It was a break in an unrelated case. A piece of evidence from a totally different crime that accidentally shone a light on one of the other members. The system didn't find them. It stumbled over them by accident.
And once that one crack appeared,
The whole thing came down. The sources say it collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. The first man broke, and then the floodgates just opened.
and the confessions confirmed everything. All the whispers the police had been ignoring.
It was all there. Confessions ripped from a grimoire, and then they found the tapes.
The tapes.
The final, absolute proof. Images no human should ever see. And at that point, there was no more denying it, no more explaining it away as isolated incidents. The organized, ritualistic nature of it was undeniable.
The truth, as the sources say, surfaced slowly, painfully, like something long drowned.
And the city of Chicago had to face this festering wound. The fact that this level of calculated evil had been happening right there among them.
And what must have been so shocking in the courtrooms was seeing them.
Seeing how ordinary they were. These weren't monsters from a movie. They were men who mowed lawns, held jobs, and nodded politely to neighbors, and that just amplified the terror for everyone.
So justice is served, death sentences, life imprisonment. But the sources say that for the city, for the families, it felt academic, hollow.
How could it not? Because it could never answer the biggest question. How many?
How many more victims were there that were never connected to the crew?
Exactly. Because the system failed so badly at the beginning, we'll probably never know the true number. And so the justice that arrived was, as the source concludes, a life sentence of what if for an entire city.
What if they had connected the dots sooner? What if they hadn't protected an informant?
So many what ifs.
So looking back now, decades later, what does this all mean? What's the final takeaway? This is more than just a chilling story.
It's a cautionary tale, a profound one.
It's an indictment, really.
It is. It's an indictment of any system where being overwhelmed becomes an excuse, where marginal victims are treated as marginal cases, because predators will always find and exploit that weakness.
And it comes back to that absolute mundane ordinariness of the evil.
Right. The lesson here is that the most dangerous monsters don't need some grand, chaotic backdrop. They are patient, they are organized, and they count on the systems around them being too slow, too scared, or too self-interested to notice.
Their evil became bureaucratized.
It did. It relied on ritual, on rules, and on the predictable failure of the institution that was supposed to stop them. The crew was, chillingly, nourished by the very institutions sworn to starve it.
That's a powerful and disturbing thought. They didn't need a powerful friend. They just needed a system that prioritized its own image over the lives of its most vulnerable people.
And that neglect, that fear of scandal, it made law enforcement a silent enabler. It completely redefines what we mean by complicity.
It's a heavy, difficult analysis to end on, but thank you for walking us through this. It's a story that absolutely needs to be understood on that level.
Of course. I think the question that still hangs over this whole case, especially for law enforcement, is this. How many of these rituals only ended because one person finally refused to keep looking away?
That refusal to look away. That's everything. The big takeaway from this, the lesson from 1980s Chicago, is so stark. Evil doesn't need chaos to grow. It just needs permission. We encourage you to think about that, about how our systems respond to the most vulnerable among us. Until next time, stay curious and keep digging.